Hello and welcome to the newest flying kayak full flight video. In today's full flight video, we're going to do it a bit different than usual. In this full flight video, I'll be talking whilst I'm flying and doing all the procedures and flying all the charts. And I hope that that'll enable me to give you a bit more flying side of the full flight, talking a bit more about the charts, the procedures, and the actual flight, and a bit less about the aircraft type and about the airport. What you can see here is a helicopter actually, because today's full flight is going to be on a helicopter. We'll be flying a Bell 429 helicopter. The one you can see here right now is simulated in X-Plane 11. It's a Freeware helicopter actually, and I'm going to put a link in the description where you can find this very helicopter. And we'll be flying it from Stuttgart, which is the airport you can see in the background, all the way to Pattonville, which is a small airport very near Stuttgart actually. This is a route that is regularly flown by rescue helicopters, as those are stationed not in Stuttgart, which is a fairly big city in Germany, but in Pattonville, as that is a smaller airport, and the rescue helicopters will not come into conflict with the much larger airliner traffic that also uses Stuttgart International Airport. Alright, so let's just quickly jump into the cockpit. Now, in addition to this helicopter add-on that is really insanely well modeled, I'm actually going to be using another plugin. Just going to open that real quick. It's called X-Checklists, and we're going to use it to show our procedures here in a written form. I'll work through these procedures and I'll have them open here right next to you guys on the screen, so you can see those at any time. So without further ado, let's start the flight and take a quick look at the route, which I'll do right now. So before we're going to start our engines, we're just going to take a very quick look at our route for today. The app I'm using to do this is called Plan G. I'm going to put a link in the description. It's a freeware flight planning program, and actually one of the best flight planning programs for Microsoft Flight Simulator X, prepared and X-Plane out there. So, we're going to start out in Stuttgart, which is Stuttgart International Airport, with its two helipads down there. Then from there, we're going to follow a visual departure procedure. This means that we're going to more or less directly fly towards a visual reference point. In our case, it's going to be visual reference point Echo, right here. And then we're going to follow, well, mostly the direct route. We could fly over and onto the Autobahn, which is something we might do if the visibility isn't all too good. And then we're going to fly to Wasserturm, which is going to be the next visual reference point. And from Wasserturm, we're going to continue flying to the next visual reference point, Autokino, and then down to Pattonville. Now, I'm going to explain this in a bit more detail once we're actually flying, and once the engines are started. I'm just going to quickly talk about the departure procedure. But as you can see here, these two visual reference points are our arrival visual reference points, and their purpose is to keep us away from residential areas mostly, as Pattonville does lie within a residential area. So, well, understandably they don't want helicopters flying over their head the entire time. So more or less we're going to avoid that by following a bit of a green corridor. There's more green than you see here in the map, and there's definitely a green area here, so basically places where there are no residential areas that we could disturb with our helicopter. The departure is going to be over Stuttgart. More or less we're going to fly from the airport straight out to visual reference point Bravo, and I'm going to talk about that when I'm going to tell you a bit more about the departure procedure. Pattonville doesn't have a traffic pattern. You always approach it using these visual reference points, so we should be good in that regard. Alright, so let's hop back into the cockpit and fly this. And welcome back to the pre-start checklist and the beginning of the flight. So we're just going to quickly work through the procedure here. So throttles 1 and 2 are both in the idle position, the RPM switch is in the auto position, Those are all not simulated. Emergency bus battery feed is in normal. That's all down here. Fuel balance pump is normal. Fuel forward transfers in normal. Center DU emergency is in normal. Bus interconnect is in normal. Non-essential bus is in normal. Battery relay is in normal. Battery switches off, just as generators 1 and 2 are in off. Hydraulic switches in normal. Pitot-static is off. Instrument brightness switch, we're going to turn that to bright. Engine number 2 is off. Start switch centered. Engine number 1 is off. Fire agent release switch is centered but not simulated anyways. And the anti-collision lights are down here somewhere. They are on. The position lights are on, and the emergency lights are auto. Whoa. Okay. So the GPU, just gonna quickly connect that. Now this add-on provides a handy plugin menu where you can just select the GPU and other features to on. GPUs on. Battery switch, now we get to turn it on. It's on, and the built-in self-test is currently working up. Cautions and warnings are all eliminated. Fire detection system, now interestingly enough, test switch for that is over there. That definitely works. Fuel quantity, just having a quick look at that. Fuel, that should be more than enough to get us to Pattonville. Voltage minimum, yep, we're at more than 22 volts actually. The rotor brake handle is on the roof, it's up. Then we're going to check the throttles. So they both should rotate to the flight detent, which they both obviously do. We can both return them to up. Sorry about that, that was a bit of a runaway zoom there. There, now, but it still does return to idle. And the flight and idle stops are working. The throttles are both in the 3 o'clock position. The pedals are neutral. The cyclic is centered. Collective is down, and the trim switch is down there. It's on. So we can now go ahead and start our engines. Before I start our engines, I'm just going to quickly tell you about the departure procedure that we're going to fly in just a second, as this is a visual departure and thus significantly different from anything you'd fly under normal conditions in instrument flight. But this is a helicopter. Helicopters are most commonly operated in visual flight, just as airplanes are too, by the way. So we'll just check that chart and take a look at what we're actually going to have to do once we're off the ground. Hello, and welcome to the discussion of the departure procedure. So what we're going to talk about now is our departure from Stuttgart. Now we're going to fly more or less midfield here, and then we're going to turn out towards the visual reference point Echo, which is just on the border of Stuttgart here. And the goal is to fly there, because that's a so-called visual departure. As you probably know, on an instrument departure, you're going to follow an instrument predefined route consisting of several waypoints, and you do the same thing on a visual departure. You follow a predefined route to a predefined waypoint. In our case, as a helicopter, we're going to just fly directly to waypoint Echo. Once we're there, we're going to continue on all the way to our other visual reference points for Pattonville, which I'll discuss once we're going to fly to Pattonville. Also, during the departure, you can expect to see a small version of this chart just in the side of the picture, so you can orient yourself a bit better as we're flying along. Alright, welcome back to the cockpit again, and we'll just start the engines now. So rotor and tail areas should be clear, and now we're going to turn our engine number 1 switch to run and engage the number 1 starter, and we can hear the engine spooling up there. And we're waiting for the engine start switch to recenter. which it actually already did. And the engine warning is extinguished. Rotor is turning, and we'll turn on generator number 1. And generator number 1 caution is off. So let's actually turn on the second engine. Oh. And there's that engine. Engine number 2 and starter 2 are engaged. And we're waiting for 50% NG for this starter switch flips over to the center again. Just right here, engine number 2 out warning is extinguished, and the generator number 2 switch is on, generator caution is extinguished, and we're gonna disconnect our ground power unit and check that the generator load is distributed. Our voltage is at least 28 volts, and our idle NG is stable at around 65% NG. All our other engine instruments are within parameters, and our remaining caution messages are acknowledged. System check. Trim switches off, trim off caution is being displayed, pedals are neutral, cyclic is set and light out, collective is down, throttle 1 and 2 are in idle, hydraulic switch is in number 1 off, so we get the caution, we get no uncommanded movements, and we're going to move all controls 1 inch in every direction to check if they still work, even if one of the hydraulic systems failed. And that works perfectly. Hydraulic switch is back to normal. Caution is extinguished, and we're going to turn off the hydraulics 2 system. Same thing here, caution, no uncommanded movements, and around we go, once in every direction. So all controls work, hydraulic switch is back to normal, caution is extinguished, and pressure is normal. Hydraulic system check is completed, so we're going to turn on autopilot 1, autopilot 2, and the trim switch. So these all work. And we're going to set that to attitude, check it shows at, and we're going to check the SCAS function, and then we're going to increase the throttles to flight. Now the throttles of a helicopter stay pretty constant most of the time. You only modulate the RPM by changing the angle of attack of the blades. Warning, RPM light now extinguished, RPM are increased and stabilized at 100%. And we're going to turn that switch to 104%. Hello? Work, please, switch. Hello? Oh no. Ah, now it's working, and my RPM increases and stabilizes at 104%. And we're going to turn it back to auto, and it decreases and stabilizes at 100%. Then we're going to turn on both of our pitot statics, which checks the cautions and the amperages, and we're going to turn them both off for now. Then we're going to not test the ELT because that caused a bug as far as I know. We're going to turn on the TCAS, well, it turns on the TCAS, the ELT, sorry, and we don't want to turn that on. And the transponder is in standby. Radios, nav aids, GPS, and radar are set. Flight display unit seems to be working. Just going to give a quick check for the barometric pressure, which is 1014, and not what we've got set at the moment. 6, 5, and 1014. And all our mission systems seem to be working. So 1014. Yep, that's set. Alright. So we're now all set for departure. So let's go ahead and take a helicopter off. Taking off a helicopter is, as you might have guessed by now, slightly different from taking off in an airplane. Unlike what you do in a helicopter, in an airplane you have a runway to accelerate from. In a helicopter you only have a helipad. So what I'm going to do next is I'm basically going to lift the helicopter off